Hey, it's Chad with Flat Creek Farm. We've been doing barbed wire fence lately. A lot of barbed wire fence lately. In fact, we're well over a mile at this point of building new fence, and we've repaired a lot of old broken down fence as well. Needless to say, we've learned a lot along the way. And before you go, well, I'm not going to be building barbed wire fence, some of the principles that we have taken and applied to this project are applicable to all kinds of different fences and just to building things in general. So stick around. If you like the content, you find it helpful, enjoyable, then consider subscribing to our channel. Leave us some feedback, give us a like. Appreciate the support. The most critical aspect to building a proper fence is getting the bracing, the skeleton done the right way. And if you get that set up, then the rest of it goes relatively smoothly. And just as a finished carpenter in building a house, that if the person who built the walls, they didn't leave you nailing boards, they didn't make things square, it looks okay when you first get going, but as time goes on and you get further along in the process, it makes things a lot more difficult for the next person or the next step in the process. So a little bit of time in the beginning, setting the bracing up properly will save you a lot of headache, and you want the fence to look nice because oftentimes it's really visual. People are driving by it all the time, looking at the work that you've completed. So making sure that things are strong and straight is just the right way to do it. When you're getting ready to set your corner posts, you want to actually physically stand in the position of the corner post and look in both directions, and that way you can see a straight line to where your next brace is going to be. And if you need to, you can take a few steps forward or backward to make sure that you're getting as much of the field in there and getting the straightest line through the easiest pathway to where you want to be. Ideally, when you're digging your holes, you'll be in what we call hero dirt, very little rocks, very soft soil. In the springtime, if you do have soil like that, please refrain from gloating too much in the comments below. However, that's not always the case. If you're going to be doing a decent amount of fencing, it's really worth your time to go and rent an auger if you do not have one. Find a neighbor that has one. We do a lot of that around here. They have an implement, we don't. We have one that they don't, and we just kind of swap as needed. That way that not everybody has to have every single implement. However, we all get the use and the benefit of having them. Obviously, you want your hole to be at the correct depth so that you have ideally at least 2 feet of post below the surface and leaving just over 4 feet above, leaving space for all the wires and for the brace. Once you get your post situated in the ground and you get it nice and straight, then begin tamping around, adding a little bit of dirt at a time, tamping it down, packing that dirt nice and tight before adding more in. It can be a little tempting, I understand, to kick a lot of dirt in so that you tamp it down all at once. However, the more time you spend putting in just little bits and tamping it down, the firmer that post is going to be, the more secure it is, and the less likely that it's going to move on you when you put tension on it. We used wooden posts that taper down roughly to about 2 inches, which makes it really clean for us. We just take a drill bit that's slightly larger than that and drill out the hole, fit it in there. But in order to get the spacing right, we take that same pole and we just lay it on the ground at the base of it to get the rough measurement, make sure that it lines up in the same direction that you're going, pointing it right toward the next brace, and then digging the next hole. Once you have that hole dug, you can set your second post in, leaving it untamped for the time being so that you can slide the top rail into both posts and then tamping it into place. Once you get your corner set, the next thing you do is run a diagonal wire looping through fencing staples from the top of one post down to the bottom of the other. Now, some people get a little bit confused on this, but I always think in my mind, which way is the fence going to be pulling? And I want the wire, whatever direction that's facing, to be tying the top of that post into the bottom of the corner post. That way, as the tension in the 4 strands of barbed wire are pulling it to the side, that diagonal is tying that post down to the bottom of the post where it's secured in the ground, giving it much more strength. If we're putting in a corner brace that's at an angle that's greater than 90 degrees, we like to do a little bit of additional support because we found that the tension of the fence, even though you're tying the top of that post down to the bottom corner, if you have 2 of them and it's at that wide angle, it really leverages up and out of the ground. We've seen it happen to some of the fencing that we've done in the past. and we've had to go back and fix it the best we could. It never looks as good as when you first put it in. So now what we're doing is we're just going ahead and adding additional support, and you can do that a couple of ways. You can tie a wire down to a T-post that's in at an angle from the outside of the corner holding it, or you can add a T-post on the inside of the corner going from the ground up inside of the corner. And what we do is you put in 2 screws, one on either side of the T-post, securing it to the wooden post. Whether you put the bracing on the inside or the outside really depends on where the corner is and if it's an inside or outside corner. I decided to bring us outside to finish this video because it's super lightly raining, and inside the greenhouse underneath that plastic you hear every single drop. I think one of the biggest time savers that we do is to string a wire from one brace to the next, from a corner to the next H brace, to stretch it pretty tight and have somebody go out into the center and just pick it up and drop it until it looks straight in between the 2 braces. And what that does is it allows you to then work off of that wire as you're putting in T-posts, and it just works as a great guide. Now you can have 2 people with a chunk of rebar or a wooden stick walking on either side of the barbed wire and run it out that way. Or you can do a little setup like my dad did on this 4-wheeler, so that it allows you to run out wire really quickly with not near the effort. Getting a fence stretcher is critical to getting single-stranded wire tight, like barbed wire or smooth wire or something like that. If you're using field fence, you can sandwich the fence between 2 boards and then hook a strap onto it and tighten it that way. Using a fence stretcher is really easy. Hook it onto the barbed wire, pull it around a post, tighten it down pretty good, and it's helpful to have somebody out sort of in the center that can pick it up and drop it, and that just allows you to know that you're not getting hung up on anything. And this is also why you do the top wire first. If you do the bottom wire first, then when you stretch out when you run out your next couple wires, you're going to be caught on them every time you try to lift them up. So if you have your top wire up, you can do from the bottom up without getting it tangled up on the top wire. We like to put a T-post about every 20 feet. It's not an exact measurement. We just pace it out and drop the posts and then come back and pound them in the ground. However, there will be some situations where you could be a little bit closer together if you need more support. If the fence is really getting pushed on heavy by animals, you're gonna probably want a few more posts in there to give it that added strength as well. The spacing that you do on your wires is going to be dependent on what kind of animals you're trying to keep in or out. Now, we have mainly cows and horses that are gonna be testing this fence. And so for us, we come up 18 inches from the ground and then have 10-inch intervals for the next 3 wires. We use a spacing stick that allows us to be consistent on the post. We clip the top wire first as we move through. That allows us to then come back and do the next wires on the way down, not tangling up again as we move down the post. A quick note, if you plan on fencing and you have some time to prepare ahead of time, we highly recommend doing it in the springtime when the ground is really, really soft. It's not been dried out by the summer sun. It's not frozen. Your arms and your back will thank you later on. When we do bracing in between corner posts, it really depends on a couple of things. Are we making any turns? Most of the fields that we have, it's not a straight shot. You're doing these gentle curves or maybe a dog leg. If you have a change in direction, sometimes we'll throw a brace up there and then brace it from the outside or the inside, depending on what it needs. Also, if you dip down or you crest over, you're probably going to want to put a brace there because you have pressure not just from side to side, but up and down. And it also allows you to keep that fence tight from side to side if you're doing a really long run. The longest we'll go before we put in a brace is probably 400 to 500 feet if it's a really straight, flat stretch. Again, you just have to sort of feel this out, knowing that it's critical for this fence to work, for you to keep the wires tight. If you have to put in a middle brace, or what we sometimes will call H braces if the posts are sticking up really high, if you have to do one of those, you're gonna want a little bit of thunder. You're gonna want support, not just with a corner brace going one direction, but you're going to want it going both directions. Sometimes you'll see people run wires diagonally from both the tops of both posts to the bottoms of the other side, and then they'll use one stake and wrap it really tight, and that kind of works, but ideally what you want is you want to have them independent of each other. And so when you run the wire around the posts, you want to make sure that they're separated, not intertwined. And what that allows you to do is to tension them independently so that you don't know which side is going to be pulled more, to the right or to the left. And so you tighten them equally, but then as the fence settles and the tension is applied, if it's shifted to the right, then it'll have the support it needs on that diagonal. If it's shifted to the left, vice versa. If you tie them both together, then it just makes the whole thing generally tight, but it's able to move a little bit more in our experience. Back in the day, before these little ones came along, my wife and I and my dad used to do the majority of the work ourselves, and we took a lot of pride in that. But something that we've learned is some things are worth hiring out, and we're getting a little bit of help from some really hardworking girls around the area, and they've been just awesome, and we're really happy to have their help. And so what we've been doing is, like, the Saturday before, my dad and I would go around and build the braces, and then the next Friday when I'm at work, my wife and two girls and my dad would go around and put in the wire and pound all the posts. That setup worked really well for us. It's really worth asking yourself what needs to be hired out in order for you to help finish the project. We knew that we could probably do this project given enough time, but hey, we have open range here. There's cows already showing up, and we need to get this fence done. So in order for us to get this project done, we required a little bit of help. And it's fun to get to see young people working hard. It's good to have this project in the rearview mirror, and we have several others that we're working on right now. So please follow along in the channel, and we'll see you guys next time.